We're here to talk about one of our best friends, Bobby Cox. For me, Bobby is Braves royalty. I can't imagine there's anything that you're going to learn about who Bobby was by being here today. What you've written is amazing, emotional. Shoot, I feel a little emotional sitting here talking about him. He was such a, sort of patron saint of the Braves. But I thought I'd start off saying we're going to do some really neat things for Bobby to recognize him. Starting off tonight, we'll have a moment of silence before the game for he and Ted. Amazing that these two guys went down within days of each other after having been around each other for so many years. Starting tonight, I get to show you something pretty cool. We're going to be, the team is going to be wearing number 6 on the back of the cap, embroidered. Beautiful, subtle, and just like we did for Hank and for Necro when they passed, we had them on each side exactly like this. This one sits above, so not that one is better than the other, but I like that portrayal a little better. Let me put that right there.
Thank you.
So I think Bobby'd be very proud of having his number on the back. And so there was, one other sort of emotional thing for me. It's pretty well known that when Bobby had his stroke, he was sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon signing a box of balls. And on each ball, it was HOF number 6, Hall of Fame. And Bobby was, really good at signing balls and getting them out to people. Well, he had the stroke. He went down off the chair. His struggle to get rescued is well known. Heroic, toughest guy. Most people would have never made it out of that room. Bobby Cox did. Pam wasn't there. Pam got home later, his wife. And on the floor, when she got there below the chair, was one ball missing out of the pack of balls that he was signing, and the pen. So when he went down, all of those things were right there at the base of the chair. So she picked that ball up and rightly concluded that that was the final ball that Bobby ever signed. And so to my great astonishment, Pam sent me that ball. And this is the ball that, and it says on it, Bobby Cox in his handwriting, HOF 2014 number 6. He signed that ball, last ball he ever signed. So, you talk about one of my most prized possessions in the world, that's it. And it's in my trophy case. I just pulled it out to bring it down to show you guys. But, you can be darn sure that's going to get well taken care of for the rest of time. And last ball, I'll leave it up here after we finish. You may want to take a quick look at it. But, Bobby, as I said, is Braves royalty, very special. I got to be around him virtually for his entire time at the Atlanta Braves. You have a smile on your face almost all the time when you're with Bobby because that's who he is. He's always entertaining, always special, and he always knows something. He always makes you feel good. And so I don't think I ever had a moment with Bobby, and I was with Bobby on the golf course and on the road in buses, and and many of you had those same experiences, except maybe the golf part. And so I have lots of thoughts about Bobby. I don't think your portrayal of him and your how you describe Bobby, it's unbelievable how much the people in this room have written beautiful things about him. So I don't think I can add that much to that part of it, but I'm open to discussion.
Terry, I think one thing, let's go back to 1985 and Fay Vincent. Then a couple months later, you add, you know what Fay said about the Braves at the time, and then you add Sherholtz. But then to just add Bobby, how much did this organization change with those two additions?
Well, Bobby, that at that period when Fay was here, observing what he considered a fairly dismal and losing franchise, and not very complimentary to add to that. And Bobby was the general manager, and Bobby he had such a big heart, and the guys he hired as managers, he loved them, and Tanner and Nixon, and they were his guys. And the idea that Bobby Cox would ever step into that role and replace one of his guys that he hired, impossible. And it's just, the loyalty factor. So that was one of the greatest barriers. But at that point, Bobby Cox really, really wanted to manage this team. But he's just too great a guy, too loyal to make that move. And it was through, right around that time, the discussions. I remember having lunch with him and saying, sort of facetiously to him, you don't say these kinds of things to Bobby Cox. But I said, Bobby, one of two things is going on here. Either you're not a very good general manager and you've hired great managers who just can't can't win with the bad players you're handing, or the opposite, you're the greatest general manager that ever lived, which was a lot closer to the truth, and you're hiring guys that can't win a game with great players or up-and-coming players. And he knew the answer, which was the latter. And so it was a lot of cajoling, a lot of pushing that caused Bobby to actually make that decision. And that was the moment that the world changed, because once he vacated that position, soon after, it's legend. We talked John Sherholtz out of the shower one day, and after he had originally turned us down and turned us back into an acceptance, and off he came. And that winter of 1991, as the winter turned to spring, it was unbelievable. You could feel the difference. You were here, right? I was wondering if you were born. Okay.
As someone who's been around from the beginning, the Braves have always felt like family. When did that start to take place, that genesis? Because you saw Bobby manage before in the 70s and then later, and at some point it became an organization that was extremely loyal. It felt like family. All the players wanted to play for the Braves, who played on other teams. It just became a different type of organization.
Well, we had dramatic ups and downs through the 80s. We mostly finished last, but we had the wonderful 82 and 83 period where, we looked like we really had captured lightning. But Ted was running the team solely. It was his. He so enjoyed running the team, and I think he was his own worst critic, because as we got to the late 80s, it was apparent that it wasn't working out. And there's one of the few things in the world that Ted had ever done that we didn't win at. And I, I'll have to say, I threw my own criticism in there a few times, maybe too many. And so I remember it was the summer of 1990, late summer, and Ted had this big roll of keys that opened every lock in the stadium. It was that big. He carried it around in his pocket. It looked ridiculous, but so he walked into my office and he took the whole thing of keys out, bam, put a hole right in my wooden desk, and he was so frustrated. If you think you could, it was just a passing of the torch that to Sherholtz and Ted. Sherholtz hadn't quite gotten here yet, but Bobby had made the commitment, and that was, if you had to pick a moment when there came a change in culture, a change in, Bobby Cox on the field, John Sherholtz pulling the strings from above, and all of the aspects of Turner Broadcasting supporting that cast, and no longer treating this as a piece of programming that was driving a media empire. It became the team of its own, and my goodness, we all know the 14 straight. It's sort of hard to believe that it did turn that fast, and you have to know that Bobby Cox was behind that. All of those drafts through the late 80s, those were all his people and his culture. So where that changed, Bobby had his hand on the pulse of this team all the way through the late 80s. And, I think of him as the general manager and in the old Atlanta Stadium. And he had lunch in the Stadium Club every day. As you all remember, there was no place to eat anywhere around there. So every day he would show up, and people stood in line to have lunch with him. He was, even then he was magnetic. Whether it was a Turner executive or it was somebody on the staff or an assistant secretary or a scout in for, he constantly, he had lunch with clients. They were fixing him up with, the, head of the burger, place so that he could impress them. Bobby just was, so he was touching everything at that point. And when he finally stepped down into the back into the dugout, all of that coalesced. That's my remembrance.
Terry, how much of Braves' way is Bobby Cox's way, Bobby Cox's culture, and what a part of that do you want to see 10, 20, 50 years from now within this organization?
I've always heard the Braves' way. We've used that for many, many years as a, sort of to describe our culture. I don't even know that there is such a thing as the Braves' way. It's just sort of I think part of the success of this franchise has been, maybe a little DNA from Ted, but there's just a belief that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it the best way possible with the most ammunition, the most effort we can bring. I have that DNA in me. I worked for Ted for 30 years. I got the wonderful experience of learning how Ted thought, learning that he was a genius, learning how geniuses thought and what they expect of businesses. To think that we took a little broken down UHF television station into a company that was doing business in the late 90s in 100 countries and with 40 networks, and it's unbelievable. And that's the stuff that I think seeps into the team and into the culture and into the, Ted was long gone. Bobby had his role, he's gone, but it's still there. All of the, the way people feel about, you hear Walt Weiss sitting up here talking about the brand and SNIT, and they've all got it.
You've had interactions with political leaders, corporate leaders from around the world. Compare some of the greats to Bobby's communication skills, his personal skills. What Bobby possessed, how does that compare to some of the great leaders?
Interesting question. Bobby's ability to lead men and to communicate with men, and some of you have been in the clubhouse when he was doing this. Bobby ran the clubhouse sort of like an old world dad to me. The players, quote, / kids, they loved him, they respected him, but there was a healthy little undercurrent of fear to the whole thing. And the whole amalgam was just so, such an amazing relationship that everybody wanted to play for him. It was a little bit like everybody wanted to work for Ted. When we had 20,000 employees, if you asked, somebody in, London who they worked for, it wasn't their boss, it was Ted Turner. And if somebody said it was in this organization, they played for Bobby Cox. They would kill for Bobby Cox, walk over hot coals for him. So that was it was as good as I have ever seen.
Go ahead.
Do you have a favorite Bobby story? Something that, you know, the two of you did? Anything golf course, restaurant, in the dugout, clubhouse, wherever?
You know, I wouldn't say, I've got, you know, there's as many Bobby stories you can't talk about as the ones you can. And you know, I would probably split them almost down the middle. But you know, my memories of Bobby are just being on the road with him, sitting in a dugout 3 or 4 hours before a game. Every security guy, every groundskeeper, the people just walking around, they all wanted to come up and pay their respects to Bobby Cox. And the people that came over, he knew half their names. I mean, in every stadium in the country. It's just phenomenal. He lived baseball so deeply, and in a way that most people never even, you know, think about. He's sort of one of those people you would say, Bobby has forgotten more than most people will ever know about baseball. And he just is consummate. He lived for it. You know, every day of his sickness, the only thing that kept him going, I think, was baseball.